Lord of the Bow and Blade. Chapter 1. The bow is a weapon capable of controlling human life from a distance. This is also a metal weapon, intended mainly for shooting. It consists of two main parts. The bow is a flexible handle that is used to tighten the bowstring. The string is the rope or ribbon that connects the two ends of the bow. An arrow is part of a bow, an extension of your arm. She is fast like lightning, strong like thunder, and sharp like a snake's fang. Just imagine, even for a minute, how a gun is aimed at you, which is not even visible. Damn, what could possibly be scarier? That's right, nothing. At this time, strange activities were going on at Changbik Mountain. The mountain is shrouded in tall, lush trees that stretch all the way to the sky. They trees have a dense crown, which creates a feeling of shelter and safety. In the background you can see high mountains that are covered with snow. Mountains create a feeling of grandeur and power of nature. The sky is blue and cloudless. The sun shines brightly, creating a feeling of warmth and light. There is thick grass on the ground, which turns green and fragrant. Somewhere deep in these forests, a boy about 13 years old was holding a bow in his hands, pulling the string and aiming at the target. The firewood is in a wooden frame, so it does not succumb to the wind. The boy was dark-haired with short hair. He aimed straight at the target, drawing the arrow even tighter until the base of the bow bent. Next to him, on the right side, stood his mentor, an old man with a long gray beard. He wears a white robe that reaches to the floor. The old man has bracelets and rings on his hands and feet. His face is wrinkled and has a wise expression. He looks into the distance with a thoughtful expression on his face. Overall, the old man looks strong and confident. He radiates wisdom and calm. Martial art, practicing archery is called Kyudo, said the old man with a surprised face. The boy, with eyes as blue as the sky, still held a bow in his hands, pulling a deadly, for a real battle, arrow, aiming straight at the bullseye on the target. The expression on his face was confident and calm, as if he did this every day, and his hands were in a position that he had probably memorized for his entire life. His clothes are simple, a bit rustic, a traditional Japanese kimono costume. The kimono consists of two parts, haori, upper part, and yukata, lower part. A haori is a long, wide button-down shirt that fastens at the right shoulder. It is usually made from cotton or linen and has a bright color. The hair often has patterns or designs on it. Yukata is a short, loose dress that also fastens at the right shoulder. It is usually made from cotton and has a solid color. On his belt he has an ordinary piece of fabric, which is responsible for the belt to which the knife is attached. Attached to the left leg is a case with arrows that will definitely be used in class. Short but thin legs stand in a stance and black shoes that look like check shoes. He finally took aim and shot the arrow at the target. The expression on his face has not changed, still the same riveted gaze, thoughtful eyes, lack of a smile. The hands remained in the same position, but the arrow was no longer in the bow. The stela, picking up speed, hit the target. If we take a closer look at the target, we can say that it is made from a piece of cloth, which is tied to a wooden frame with ordinary ropes. Having looked at this, the mentor continued his story. Ordinary shooting in Kyudo is called pensa, ordinary shooting, the teacher said, looking at the target. The teacher remained unshaken. He still stood and watched the movements and technique of the student. The boy decided to shoot the arrow differently. He raised his bow and arrow above the level of his thick hair and closed one eye to take better aim. The look was still the same, not even a single muscle moved on his miniature face. The index finger of the hand that held the bow was bent in the direction of the target at which his arrow would fly. The old man continued to speak almost in the student's ear. When there are a lot of opponents, you won't have time to take aim. Remember this, he said. After these words or remarks, the boy began to shoot the arrows one by one. They flew confidently, not in my direction in the wind, which is not strange, since the iron tip and feathers at the end of the arrow are balanced. The weapon quickly reached the tissue target and plunged deeply into it, leaving the tip out of sight of both student and mentor. Also, in such cases, saksa, shooting at speed, is used. The features of this type of shooting are as follows. In saksa shooting competitions, the time to shoot each target is limited. The faster the shooter hits the target, the higher his score. In saksa shooting competitions, participants shoot at 5 targets located at a distance of 25 meters. This requires the shooter to be in good physical condition. In Saksa shooting competitions, competitors are under a lot of pressure as their performance is dependent on time. The shooter must be able to remain calm and concentrate, the teacher said, because a little warrior needs to know all this. The boy, lowering his bow, began to look at the results of his work. He didn't know whether he worked well or poorly today, what mistakes he might have made because he didn't see himself from the outside. The teacher carried this burden. The mentor still looked at the target and thought whether the student was ready for the new stage, no matter how he had been studying for a long time and was doing very well. After thinking for 2 minutes, he says, "The next level is Yangwansa. It already involves firing several arrows at the same time." The student, as it turned out, had long hair, stood and watched. Inside, he rejoiced that he would finally be able to reach a new level, but he did not show these emotions, because a good warrior is one who knows how to control them both during battle and in general. In general, be cold-blooded and ruthless. Now the teacher, opening his big gray eyes, looked around, looked again at the target. "Only one who has reached Yangwansa can be awarded the title of a real archer," he said, taking the bow in his long and wrinkled hands. He immediately installed 3 arrows on the bowstring and began to tension them and adjust their direction so that they would fly more evenly into the fabric in front of him. The eyes were open, only the right one was slightly narrowed. "You need to be able to shoot as many as 3 arrows at the same time," he said. The boy looked first at his mentor, then at the target, into which 3 arrows would fly at the same time any minute. His childish face remained calm, although deep in his soul he screamed, beat himself on the chest, cried with joy and much more, because his mentor had not shown anything himself for a long time. The boy loved it, but saw it very, very rarely. The old man let go of the bowstring and the arrows burst into the airflow with great speed and flew, each in their own direction. None hit the target, but each hit the 3 trees that stood on either side of the target. The arrows hit the centers of the tree and it became one and the same, neither a millimeter lower nor a millimeter higher. The boy gasped imperceptibly. "Each," the old man began to say, "is intended for its own purpose, which the archer chooses. And finally, Igiosi archery using internal energy." The teacher, having said this, saw a hare. His fluffy tail shook with fear, and he began to move towards the forest to hide the potential hunter. The old man, in turn, took a certain stance and pulled the arrow and began to aim at the victim. The hare began to speed up. It has long ears that stick up. His body is slender and flexible, and his legs are long and strong. Nature itself gave him the opportunity to run away from hunters and save his life. Now, unfortunately, he won't succeed. The old man shot an arrow, which traveled very quickly and increased the magic that he directed at her. The arrow, as if following celestial navigation, flew along the tracks and route of the hare and quickly reached him. The fluffy animal hovered in the air for a couple of seconds and fell to the ground dead. The mentor began to pick up speed, they accelerated very quickly, but despite this, he spoke freely, without hesitating. "You can reach any target with a sword, so why not with an arrow?" He asked a rhetorical question. His speed was incredible for his age. He moved and jumped confidently. There was still a bow in his hand, but this time with 3 arrows, the bowstring was drawn. The old man somersaulted and quickly landed on his feet, releasing arrows. The magic they emitted quickly went to the sky, because there were 3 birds in the sky. The birds are gray with black feathers. They fly in a circle, creating a whirlwind effect. Before they had time to understand what was happening, they felt pain and fell to the ground. The old man, pleased with himself, says, "In a word, I call archery paduasal a headhunting technique." The boy at this time stood and looked at all this. He was not afraid or disgusted, he just wanted to become the same as his teacher, to achieve the technique that he knew. There, somewhere deep in the forest, stood their house. This is a wooden house built in traditional Chinese style. The house is located in the forest, among the trees. It is 1-story, with a gable roof covered with thatch. The house has 3 rooms, a kitchen, a bedroom and a veranda. The house is made of logs, covered with boards. The roof is covered with thatch, which is brown in color. Near the house there are 2 wooden benches where you can relax. There are trees around the house that give it comfort and protect it from the wind. On 2 trees, next to the house, hung a hammock, in which an old man slept, who literally 10 minutes ago showed archery tactics. In his dream, he slept with his mouth open and exhaled hot air, which swayed the leaves falling from the trees. He began to open his eyes and leave the kingdom of Morphia when he heard a cry, "Grandfather! Grandfather!" The boy shouted, quickly running to the hammock on which the streak lay. He stretched and covered his mouth with his hand and asked, "What's wrong?" In the voice of the boy's mentor and grandfather one could hear a note of dissatisfaction, because he was sleeping and probably had a wonderful dream. A boy with jet black hair shouted overexcitedly, "I want you to see how successful I am at archery in strong winds." He has an open mouth and wide eyes, indicating that he is surprised or startled. His eyebrows are raised, which is also a sign of surprise and superiority. The boy, talking so enlarged about his new skills, did not notice how his grandfather's stick flew at him and did not hit him on the head very hard, but still left a kind of discomfort. "I!" he shouted, as it was unexpected. The old man, choking with anger, began to shout, "Oh, you scoundrel! How could you wake me up during my meditation because of such a trifle? I'm almost at the top. Ugh, you ruined everything. And how, you bad boy, were you going to answer me for this?" The old man did not let up. His face radiated such anger that the boy had never seen before, even though he had already woken him up several times. It looks like this was the last straw. The old man still remained in the hammock, only he lifted his body up a little. The boy just screamed like ouch, and because of the blow to the head, he developed a lump right in the center of the top of his head. This action of his grandfather angered him, but he decided not to show it too much, because he had to respect the chain of command. The only thing he could say was, "My God, you were drooling, were you meditating, you say?" Not very similar. The displeasure did not leave his face. The boy kept rubbing the area of the bruise, while maintaining a displeased face. The old man was amazed at such audacity, so he stood up and said loudly, so that the birds that were sitting in the trees rose very quickly into the sky, "My stick misses you." But still, he gave up and went with his grandson to the target, slightly deeper into the dense forest. Now there was an ordinary tree knot there, and not a fabric target. The boy pulled out his bow and placed an arrow, that is, he was already ready to show new shooting tricks. He listened carefully to the sound of the wind and tried to get used to its stormy flow. "Have you learned to shoot in strong winds?" the boy's grandfather asked with a little sarcasm. "Yeah. Now it's time to check whether the breeze is blowing." "So, I'll try to hit that knot," the boy said confidently. His gaze radiated direct confidence in his actions, but his grandfather stood too calmly, just waiting for what would happen next. He looked intently at the very branch into which his grandson was about to fall. Thoughts swarmed in the old man's head. He thought and thought. At this time, the dark-haired boy had already begun to take aim at the makeshift target, but he was immediately distracted by the words of his grandfather. "Wait a minute." Having said this, he moved towards the stump on which the arrow twig stood, which greatly surprised his grandson. He reached his goal. He stood next to the stump, raising his hands up. His face expressed nothing but eternal calm. The boy paused. The kid didn't expect this, so he stopped. The old man didn't have to wait long. "Well, shoot," he said, without lowering his wrinkled hand. The boy paused. He did not expect exactly this turn of events. His eyes are wide open and his eyebrows are raised, indicating that he is surprised or startled. His mouth is open and a cry comes out, indicating that he is experiencing strong emotions. The boy stands in a stance, which indicates that he is ready for action. His arms are bent at the elbows and his fingers are tense, which is also a sign of readiness for action. One single thought flashed through his head: is Grandpa crazy, or does he have hemorrhoids so he can't stand still? The old man was waiting. His face is showing new emotions, his eyes are wide open and his eyebrows are drawn up, indicating that he is focused or interested, and his mouth is closed and his cheeks are slightly raised, which is a sign of peace or pleasure. "What? Not sure?" he asked with a surprised face. The boy began to get angry, because he is confident in his abilities, he can do anything, despite the strength of the wind, the number of arrows and everything else. "I'll definitely hit the target, but just in case there's a fireman, move away," he shouted to his grandfather. His long gray hair fluttered in the wind and his eyes began to narrow. "If you have no guts, say so," said grandfather. He stood there in shock. His eyebrows are drawn together and his eyes are wide open, indicating that he is focused on the target. The mouth is tightly closed, which is also a sign of concentration. His posture is tense, and his hands firmly hold his bow and arrow, which speaks of his determination. For the first time in all the lessons, he panicked. The goal is too small, and Grandpa is too big. He had no choice but to shoot, but he could not do it. "Shoot. You hit smaller objects in stronger winds." the old man shouted. His hair and kimono fluttered in the wind. The boy began to take aim, squinting his eye. He pulled the bowstring, and sweat flowed down his face, which arose from the fear of hitting his grandfather, because where the wind goes, there is an arrow. A good warrior calculates all this, but young animals do not fully possess this skill. Unable to withstand this tension and fear, he lowered his bow and arrow and did not let it hit the twig, which either angered his grandfather or surprised him. Hey, don't be a coward. You're a man, gather your strength into a fist, the mentor shouted, looking at his grandson with anger. The boy never fired, his fear for the life of the only person dear to him turned out to be stronger. 2 days have passed since then. The old man was meditating and at the same time remembering all his techniques and skills. He enjoyed nature and tranquility in front of his house, with his back to it. When he made the last movement, I heard a cry, "Grandfather!" His grandson shouted. The old man was already used to all this, so he calmly stood up to his full height, expecting what this restless boy had come up with this time. I found a wild pigeon bleeding in the mountains. The boy shouted, joyfully lifting the poor bird up. Yes? Come on, show it to me, the old man said in surprise, and his hair played in time with the wind. The boy, instead of showing the bird, said, Since this is a gift to me from heaven, then I'll eat it. Grandfather was surprised when he heard this. This is not his style, but sometimes this little scoundrel knows how to surprise to the point of falling and not getting up. Without thinking twice, the old man hit the boy on the head with either his staff or an ordinary stick. The boy shouted, "Aye. And why are you beating?" The boy didn't understand. Then, replaying the beginning of the conversation with his grandfather, he realized he still needed to show the bird to the old man before he got hit on the head with a stick again. His educational measures did not change. The boy put the wild pigeon on a stump next to the house. And then the hay donkey began to look at the old man. The bird has a long slender body with wide wings. The bird's plumage is white, with black spots on the wings. The bird's beak is long and sharp, and its paws are yellow. The head is wedge-shaped and the tail is long and narrow. Wild pigeon, then? Grandfather began to say quietly reproachfully, this is the Heydonkian bird, in other words, the Lord of the Sky. Heydonkian or whatever her name is, what difference does it make to him if it turns into food anyway, the boy said in bewilderment, spreading his arms in different directions. The old man was even more surprised, because from an early age he taught the boy everything he knew. At the age of 3 he could already distinguish colors, at 5 he knew how to write, and at 9 he picked up a bow for the first time. Looks like I forgot the Learn Biology section, he continued with surprise on his face. She is from the falcon family. Brave in battle and throughout her life she serves only one master. Falcons are a genus of birds of prey in the falcon family. They are distributed in all parts of the world except Antarctica. Falcons are slender birds with long, narrow wings. Their plumage is usually gray, brown or black. They have sharp claws and beaks which they use for hunting. The size and weight of falcons vary depending on the species. The smallest variety of falcon is the hobby, which has a body length of about 25 centimeters and weighs about 100 g. The largest variety of falcon is the Balaban, which has a body length of about 60 centimeters and weighs about 2 kilograms. The boy did not expect such a lecture from his grandfather about an ordinary bird. But he was very interested. Seeing his surprise, the old man continued to speak with a serious face. So what do you choose? Should I starve or look after her? The boy was even more shocked. How is that? What should I do? The grandfather mixed a storm of emotions, anger, shock, surprise, bewilderment. Is he really my grandson? He asked himself. Containing himself, he began to speak again. Are your ears dry or something? Decide, will you go without food for 2 weeks or will you take care of her? Remember, he will be your best friend and brother, he will always come to your aid. So that I don't starve, I have to finish him off? The boy asked with strange sorrow. The falcon was still lying on the stump, spreading his long wings the width of his small but strong body. The brunette looked at him again. The old man looked at him again and realized that for the first time he felt sorry for the boy. Therefore he said, make your efforts and they will definitely pay off, he said confidently, turning his gaze towards the lush forest. After this, the boy understood what he had to do. At one time, the boy remembered well what and how to do in medicine. This is what he always listened to carefully. So he quickly ran into the house and took the mortar. With the speed of light, he found the necessary herbs and began to grind them in order to make an ointment that would help stop bleeding in any part of the body. The old man, not looking at what the baby was doing, began to speak without taking his eyes off his book. He has a big wound on his wing. Collect healing herbs and stop the bleeding quickly. Turning his head, he saw the incredible. His grandson was already smearing his charge's wing with rubbed herbs. He did this carefully, one might say jewelry. The bird, in turn, sat quietly and did not move, as if it knew that the little brunette would not harm him, as long as he was no less stronger than he was now. The old man's grandson carefully smeared the wound every day. After 3 days, the wound healed a little, but the blood could have become infected with some kind of garbage. So the kid began to prepare a decoction that would help put the falcon back on its feet or fly into the sky again. The boy put the kettle on the stove and began to make a fire. The teapot is made of metal, painted black. It has a cylindrical shape with a flared top. The handle of the kettle is located on the side, and the spout is at the top. It began to boil, so the child began to build the fire even more, blowing on it more and more. The old man was meditating and talking at this time. When preparing any medicine, the main thing is not to make mistakes. And cook only over low heat, so don't turn the fire on in the stove too high, using magic, he explained to his grandson. A week later the falcon had fully recovered. He joyfully rose into the sky and began to make sounds similar to his breed. He flew high, closer to the clouds. The boy, pleased with his work, shouted very loudly despite the fact that only his grandfather was nearby. Wow! Grandfather, the falcon is flying. The little one's face radiated joy, and the old man looked at the falcon peacefully. He liked the way he behaved with the falcon, how he looked after him, how he treated him. He was very proud of his grandson. The falcon began to descend to the ground, so the brunette put out his hand so that the bird would land right there. Ah, how beautiful, the boy shouted with a sparkle in his eyes, as this is his best friend and faithful comrade. And then the boy thought about it and began to say, so, now, I need to call it something. When I first saw you, strength emanated from your face, and your wings were bleeding, the boy said thoughtfully, holding his finger near his chin. And then, removing his finger and saying loudly and at the same time joyfully, so, Cole in honor of heavy power, and Cole meant be in tribute to your perseverance, thick-skinned. How do you like it, thick-skinned? Agree, very solid? Talking to the bird, the little brunette was happy. And the falcon, hearing its new name, chirped joyfully. Chapter number 2. A house made of thatch roofs stood on the same one in the forest. The hammock and table still stood in place, not moving even a millimeter. In the volume, a grandfather sat with his grandson and talked about shooting styles and new techniques. Since you can shoot a bow decently, let's start learning something else from today, said the old man, getting ready to go outside. They walked towards the place where they always train. The boy, walking on his own wave, asked, Other? His eyes widened with hope that today he will do something new. You will master my family walking technique, Chulhunran. In martial arts, Chulhunran can be translated as skill or superiority. This word is used to denote a martial art that meets the highest standards of efficiency and skill, the old man said while walking. The old man's face was calm, as always, but his student was very surprised. Because he did not know this and had not seen this before in any book that his grandfather forced him to read in his free time from hunting and cooking. Oh, so that means you can walk in different ways? That feeling when he really needs this skill. Chulhunran is a technique created based on the gait of a wolf, the old man continued, you should know it as a future great warrior. They calmly walked along the path that led deep into the forest to their training place. The boy held a bow in his hands, and on his back arrows that were ready for battle. And the old man walked only with a stick, which he held behind his thin back. The walking technique has 2 subtypes, the first is intended for attack. This is, for example, the Yunshinbab of the Shaman clan. And the second is for defense. For example, Hamibo of the Ami clan. They finally arrived at the place where a new lesson would soon take place. The old man went forward and stood in front of his student, who stood motionless, intending to listen to every word and movement of his grandfather like a sponge. The old man struck a pose and said, Stay here and look carefully, he said loudly, causing the birds to fly away from this place where classes were being held. And then, concentrating his magic, the old man rose into the air, keeping his legs straight and his arms in a beautiful position that resembles a triangle. He, with the speed of light, bright and amazing, and the force of wind, powerful and brittle, landed next to the boy. His hair went back, as did his kimono, and his stance didn't change an inch. The student did not expect this, so he threw his hands aside, as if preparing for defense. At this time, the old man extended his hand and began to show his index finger, saying, "Saw." I'll repeat it a few more times, so watch carefully and remember my every move and their order. Within a minute, the boy's mentor moved 5 times, right and left, back and forth, jumping like a rabbit across a clearing, running away from a predator. At this time, the boy stood in confusion, but at the same time did not look away, so as not to miss anything unnecessary. Standing with his face as if he had seen these children, he said, "And this is what you need to learn? Wow! What kind of military equipment is there? It looks more like frog jumping." The boy expressed his opinion. The old man asked with a joyfully wild smile, "Well, how? Agree, it's cool?" The boy reacted quickly, thinking that if he said no, he would not be scolded again, and he would not be fed yet until he allegedly regained his sight. Therefore he said, "Oh, yes, top class." Having said this, he raised 2 thumbs to confirm his words with his own body movements. The old man, seeing the expression on the student's face, thought that something was wrong. It seems that the boy did not understand what was special about this walking technique. "Now I'll show him more clearly and easily." He began to get angry and said menacingly, "Look at me and don't yawn." "Understood." "Ah, well, okay," said the boy with a bored face. This technique is not clear to him and is not interesting at all. The old man again called on magic, and again showed the technique of movement. He jumped up, puffed and showed his skills. And then something happened that the boy did not expect. His face took on an expression of fear and surprise at what he saw in front of him. His teacher stood in front of him, and the head of a wolf appeared above his head with gray hair. She was large and had an open mouth and a grin. The wolf was gray, with a black mane on the back of his neck, and the teacher's face looked closely into the boy's eyes. The kid could only say, "Ah." I did not expect such a turn of events from this lesson. His eyes froze, and fear completely froze in his body. Because of this, he did not notice how he peed himself. All this flowed down his trouser leg, soaking his small black shoes. Seeing this, the old man shouted at the top of his voice, "What happened to you? You have a thin gut, but wake up immediately." After these words he calmed down a little and continued, "Oh, you quite an adult, but you still wet your pants. What should we do with you, such a coward?" Disappointment radiated from him. The old man did not expect what happened. The boy finally came out of his stupor and asked, "What was it?" He asked with panic in his eyes. The old man, hearing this, began to stroke his long and gray beard and began to think. It didn't last long. Almost immediately he asked, "It seems that you finally have a desire to learn this?" The boy could only say a drawn-out "aha." The old man with a serious face continued his lecture about this amazing and terrible technique. Chulhanran involves repeating not only the gait of a wolf, but also a surge of energy reminiscent of the energy of a wolf. The wolf, before attacking its prey, first petals it and only then attacks it. And as she could see, the wolf first shows its predatory nature. And this uncontrollable flow freezes the movement of the victim. Next, the wolf in one leap delivers a fatal blow, gnawing the neck, and at this point the entire hunting process usually stops. Look, I was so dumbfounded, I just felt, my intention? The old man was surprised. If something like this suddenly happened in a real battle, you would already be dead. The boy was still standing in shock from what had happened literally 5 minutes ago. He understood his mistake, but could not help himself. The old man did not let up. "Tell me, how far away was I from you?" the mentor asked with a puzzled face. "About 10 steps, the boy said after thinking. And then it dawned on him. I laughed at his movements because it looked like a frog jump, but it turns out he jumped such a long distance. The boy realized that he definitely needed to learn this technique. The boy still stood in one place with a stony face that no longer radiated fear, but also did not relax completely. The old man, without changing his mood, continued to speak. Chulhanran is mainly used not in attack, but in defense in order to maintain an occupied position and repel enemies, because more resources are lost during an attack, said the mentor, without blinking all this time. Yes? The boy said with great surprise, thinking about how he smashes enemies with the help of this technique. The sage, reading this in the eyes of his only disciple, quickly and seriously said, "What this means is, there is no reason for you to use the walking technique when attacking an enemy. Remember this." Grandfather said with sternness in his eyes and a relaxed face. His expression took on a look of concentration and determination. His eyes are wide open and his brows are slightly furrowed. Hearing these words, he paused a little. How is this possible? So I asked the teacher an inappropriate question. So, I can only use it when I'm running away from potential enemies? The old man, angry, said loudly, "Oh you! There's no other way to put it like a fool. Tell me, what is your main weapon?" Remember. Poking his finger into the boy's chest, sort of scolding him. The boy glanced sideways at the bow, but some inner fear or an ordinary child's voice could not say bow. He squeezed it tighter in his small hand, without pulling it out of the case. The old man rolled his eyes and said, "This bow, damn it. Well, why do you need to push this bow right up to the nose of a potential enemy? Will you hit me with an onion? Or an arrow to the head?" The old man says, waving his arms, without letting go of his staff or stick from one hand. And this, well, the boy began hesitantly, but did not have time to finish. The old man began to freak out, move around, scream and curse. Having calmed down, he began to speak, closing his eyes so as not to see his grandson and not start getting angry with him again. A bow is not a weapon for short range, but for long range, to make it harder to hit you. Do you understand this? I've probably already noticed that this technique allows you not only to get close to the enemy in a short time, but also to bounce away from him, he said, sometimes close to the boy's ear, sometimes far away. Sometimes the old man moved so far away, sometimes he was too close that his breath burned the skin on the boy's face. The teacher finally calmed down completely. Probably the right meditations can help with this. He began to look straight into the eyes of his student and, at the same time, his grandson. Imagine that you are sneaking behind the enemy's back and he suddenly feels a surge of predatory energy. Wrong, will he be scared? The mentor asked his student a rhetorical question. The kid said hesitantly, yeah, as if he was afraid of his grandfather's reaction and another scene of shouting in his direction, telling him that he was stupid, timid, and very small, despite the fact that he had almost no problems with a bow. The old man continued to lecture on combat walking techniques. Chulhanran allows you to stay at a respectful distance from the enemy. Martial art must be based on a deep understanding of technique and tactics. It should give the fighter the opportunity to use his skills to the fullest. If we look at existing examples, I can name a few. The first is traditional martial arts such as karate, judo, and taekwondo. These martial arts have a long history and are based on deep principles. And secondly, these are new martial arts in our world, namely, Muay Thai, kickboxing, and mixed martial arts. These martial arts are based on effective techniques and tactics that were developed for real fights. Remember? The old man asked with a trick. The baby nodded in agreement. He was not going to remember any of this, but he would pretend that he had fulfilled the teacher's main condition. The old man, without thinking twice, asked, "Shall I show you the technique again?" He asked with laughter in his eyes. The boy quickly raised his hands up and protested loudly, "No, don't." Instead of shouting, the old man returned to a much-needed, in his opinion, lecture about technology, clans and the power they represent. The clans of shamans and horsemen, who have gathered the best martial artists in their ranks, constantly argue among themselves whose technique is better. If you don't know, shamans are people who have special spiritual abilities. They can communicate with spirits, travel to other worlds, and help people solve their problems. This is their main strength. But Kanryans are kicks performed from the bottom up. Kanryans can be performed with one or two legs. They can be straight or circular. Kanryans can be aimed at the opponent's head, torso, or legs. And yet, both the Genzen technique of the Shaman clan and the Onryon Dipalsik technique are so complex in their essence that it is simply useless to compare them. Therefore, you need to study each one, down to the smallest elements. The boy, listening to this, could not resist asking a question that worried him, and posted it without thinking about the consequences. "What about our technology then?" he asked with open surprise. The old man, in turn, began to seethe with anger, because this interesting and effective technique was developed by his family and improved by him. No matter how much he restrained his anger and emotions in general, he could not resist and hit the boy on the head with his fist. He grimaced and said loudly that all the birds living in the forest had regretted their choice of place of residence 100 times. Burning with anger, the old man shouted, "Think about what you're talking about, puppy. Our technique is the only and unique walking technique in the entire universe and all other existing worlds. How can you compare technology with such dummies, you bastard?" He yelled and waved his fingers in different directions, creating the feeling that he was about to break away. The boy's eyes are wide open, which indicates surprise, because he did not expect such a strong blow from his frail grandfather. The mouth is slightly open, which indicates curiosity and what to expect next and, in general, the entire subsequent lesson. He, rubbing the place of the bruise, and the bump, which 100% will come out in an hour or two, will take a very long time to go away, said, "Ah, I didn't know that everything was so serious. I'm just starting to learn new arts, excuse me for my insolence," the boy said Okaya and Ikaya. The old man stood with even breathing and a calm face, and therefore accepted the apology of the young student and an excellent warrior in the future. After that, he continued, attracting the student's attention. As they say in our area, it is better to see once than to hear 100 times. Look carefully and try to remember, he said calmly. And then he again began to show the technique, step by step. At the first stage of the challenge, the old man assesses the situation and determines what magical powers and abilities are necessary to solve it. Then the teacher uses his magical powers and abilities to achieve the desired result. He performs various magical rituals and spells that he pronounces in his head. The last step was evaluation. The old man evaluates the results of using magic. He determines whether the desired results have been achieved and draws conclusions for the further use of magic. The baby watches all this time, without taking his gaze away from his grandfather's movements. The little brunette stood and watched, still not taking his eyes off the magic that was swarming around, like bees near a flower in the summer under the hot sun. He stood without blinking and thought, every step is so light and smooth, and most importantly, you can't hear them. The boy, realizing that the teacher had finished, lowered his miniature head and saw many, many footprints. Wow, he thought, more than 180 tracks, each of which looks in different directions. The old man's voice brought him out of his thoughts. Each pair of footprints corresponds to one post into which the body should fall when Cholhanran moves, the old man said with a straight face. The boy understood what the teacher was getting at, so he went to his tracks and began to try to follow them smoothly and in the correct order. So, first forward, he said to himself, then back, then to the left, and now. He tried further, kept his balance, remembered the order of movements as he walked, tried to imagine clots of magic around him in order to summon it, imagined the head of a wolf that frightens his enemies. But still he hesitated. What happened next? The boy panicked, looking around. The old man could not stand it and began to shout at the student, as he always does. What a fool! Who's asking you to do everything yourself? All you need to do is follow my example. Can't you even do that? He shouted. He screamed and shouted, but the student did not pay attention to him. He simply did not want to pay attention to all this. He told himself, so, 3 steps to the left. 1 to the right. 1 forward and 3 back. The boy balanced, holding his hands shoulder-width apart and his entire small body. But he still made a mistake. He fell very loudly and gracefully to the ground, the same place where the traces of his teacher were. The boy falls at high speed, his body moving in an arc. Falls straight down, his body does not rotate. The old man was so surprised that he leaned back, so that his gray hair was thrown back. Oh, you! Don't you even know how to walk? Get up, why are you lying down? Start over. I have great expectations, he shouted. The boy's come on first lasted until sunset. The earth rotates on its axis, and as it turns, the sun begins to sink below the horizon. At this time, the sun's rays pass through a large thickness of the atmosphere, and therefore the sky turns different colors. The colors of the sunset depend on the state of the atmosphere. If there is a lot of dust and smoke in the atmosphere, the sunset will be brighter and more intense. If the atmosphere is clear, the sunset will be softer and more pastel. The red color is formed due to the fact that the sun's rays with the longest wavelength, namely red, are least scattered in the atmosphere. The colors orange and yellow are formed because mid-wavelength rays from the sun, namely orange and yellow, are also scattered by the atmosphere, but not as much as red rays. The violet color is formed due to the fact that the sun's rays with the shortest wavelength, violet, are scattered the most in the atmosphere. He learned to keep his balance and skillfully walk step by step towards the teacher. dull, he kicked up dust. The old man was surprised with how persistently his student was trying to learn this technique. He went into the house and said, "I'll go and rest." "Well, okay, but until you perfectly perform all the movements that I showed, no food or sleep. So train hard." Trees look especially beautiful in the sunset sky. Their crowns, painted in bright colors, create a fabulous picture. At sunset, the sun is no longer so high, so its rays pass through a greater thickness of the atmosphere. This causes sunlight to scatter and turn the sky into different colors. Trees standing against the sunset are painted in the same colors as the sky. Their crowns turn red, orange, yellow or purple. This creates the effect of the trees glowing, as if they are filled with inner light. He did just that. The boy trained hard all night, not sitting down to rest or faltering. It was already late. The night forest is a special place that has its own unique beauty. In the dark, it becomes mysterious and enigmatic, like something out of a fairy tale. When the sun sets below the horizon, the forest plunges into darkness. Trees, bushes and grass lose their color and become black silhouettes. The sky is dotted with stars that twinkle and shimmer like diamonds. In the silence of the night you can hear many sounds. This is the singing of birds, the chirping of crickets, the babbling of a brook. Sometimes the forest is filled with mysterious rustles and noises that cause a person to feel anxiety and excitement. The old man did not rest in his self-built house at this time. The old man hid behind a wide tree near the training site. He liked to watch how diligently and stubbornly the student jumped and caused small streams of magic. He said quietly so that only he could hear himself, "So stubborn, he can't even go to bed. I'm pleasantly surprised. I'm very surprised." The full moon shines with bright white light. The moon has a perfect round shape, without any visible defects. On its surface you can distinguish several dark spots that are craters. The moon hovers in the dark sky, surrounded by many stars. The stars twinkle and shimmer, creating the effect of depth. The full moon shines with bright white light, illuminating the night sky. It seems huge and majestic, like a symbol of eternity. Against a dark background, the stars twinkle and shimmer, creating the effect of depth. The full moon rises in the center of the frame, its perfect shape and bright light captivating the eye. The brunette managed to do it after all. He summoned magic strong enough to rise into the sky and show the benefits of using the movement technique. Dawn has arrived. The night is slowly losing ground, and the first rays of the sun break through the treetops. The darkness gives way to light, and the forest comes to life. Birds begin to sing, and animals go out in search of food. The sky above the forest turns pink, orange, and yellow. These colors create a feeling of magic and romance. The air is filled with fresh aromas of flowers and herbs. At this time you can hear many sounds. This is the singing of birds, the chirping of insects, the rustling of leaves. These sounds create a feeling of calm and tranquility. Sunrise in the forest is a great time to enjoy nature and recharge your energy for the day. The old man fell asleep near that very tree, wrapped in a blanket. He woke up from a scream that sounded throughout the forest. "Yahoo! I did it!" The boy shouted joyfully, because there was no one else in this forest. The sun is high in the sky, and its rays softly illuminate the forest. Trees and bushes cast long shadows, creating an atmosphere of peace. The air is filled with the fresh aroma of pine needles and grass. In the silence you can only hear the singing of birds and the rustling of leaves. At this time you can relax and unwind from the hustle and bustle of the city. You can listen to the sounds of nature, admire the beauty of the forest and just enjoy the moment. But no one was going to rest, everyone continued to study further. The old man still shouted at the boy, "Ha! And it took a whole week, just to repeat my movements?" He asked displeasedly, without demanding an answer in return. "Oh, what a mess, why should I bring such trouble to my gray head? And what kind is this? Are you really tired? Hey, why are you breathing like that, huh?" The boy stands and does not move. His mouth is open and his eyes are wide. He looks very angry and aggressive. There are several possible reasons why a boy might be so aggressive. Perhaps he was upset or offended by something. Perhaps he is just tired and irritated. Or perhaps he just wants to attract attention. But we all understand that his anger is addressed to his grandfather, because he doesn't understand what a great guy he is and cannot step over his pride and say, "You're great. I am proud of you. You look so much like your father," and everything is in this vein. At this time, the old man began to think to himself, what an opportunity. His father, whom everyone considered a genius, trained for a whole month, while I, in turn, spent a whole month and a half. And he mastered this technique in just a week, in just 7 days. Then the grandfather realized that this boy would be better than him and his dead father. Chapter number 3. Internal energy is the sum of the kinetic energy of the chaotic thermal motion of molecules and the potential energy of their interaction. That is, the energy that is stored in the body due to its own parameters. The internal energy of a body depends on the following factors: body temperature. The higher the body temperature, the higher the average kinetic energy of molecules and the greater the internal energy. Volume of the body. The larger the volume of the body, the more molecules it contains and the greater the internal energy. State of matter. The internal energy of the same body differs in different states of matter. For example, the internal energy of water in a gaseous state is greater than in a liquid or solid state. You must use internal energy very smoothly, but why are you doing this? You are probably already tired. Yes, already. The kid didn't understand why he decided this way, so he said, "Sorry? Is there something wrong?" The old man, without noticing this, continued talking to the boy, reading out important information to the child. Even if you master Banyusimjeondoi, it is an ancient technique that originated in Korea more than 1,000 years ago. It was developed for use in martial arts as well as self-defense. Banyusimjeondoi includes a wide range of techniques, including striking, blocking, grabbing and throwing. It is also an effective martial art that can be used for self-defense and competition. It is also a great way to improve your fitness and coordination. Key features. Using a stick. Banyusimjeondoi is a stick fighting technique. The stick can be any size, but is usually about 1.5 meters long. Variety of techniques. Banyusimjeondoi includes a wide range of techniques, including striking, blocking, grabbing and throwing. Efficiency. Banyusimjeondoi is an effective martial art that can be used for self-defense and competition. And if we consider examples of subtypes of technology, we can list the following. Strikes. Banyusimjeondoi includes a wide range of strikes, including straight, side, circular and slashing strikes. Blocks. Banyusimjeondoi also includes a wide range of blocks that are used to defend against enemy strikes. Grips. Banyusimjeondoi includes several holds that are used to control the opponent. Throws. Banyusimjeondoi also includes several throws that are used to incapacitate an opponent. The kid did not understand anything that his grandfather had been telling for 20 minutes, so he asked him a question that began swarming in his head from the beginning of his mentor's lecture. What do you mean? What is Banyusimjeondoi? The boy asked with rounded eyes. The teacher realized that he had blurted out too much because he didn't want to say it. Well, since I've already started, I need to continue the story. Well, so be it. I'll tell you a secret. The technique that you have studied since childhood is Banyusimjeondoi. To reach the level of a real warrior, Banyusimjeondoi must be known, the old man said, clearing his throat. After these words, the boy became very upset. With a sad and wet face, the kid asked, "Why is it so hard for me? Am I really that weak that I can't master the Banyusimjeondoi technique?" Instead of shouting or commenting, the old man simply laughed and said, "Ah! Ha ha! Yes, it is because I have placed restrictions on your inner strength. Take your time, I'll later, oops." The old man laughs loudly and boisterously, leaning back. His laugh is so contagious that the boy could start laughing too. But no, he was not laughing, because his powers were purposefully blocked. He looked at the teacher and realized something. Today he had already lost control of himself, so he quickly began to come up with a story that he could use to excuse himself. He blocked the boy's power due to psychological trauma. As a child, the boy witnessed the murder of his family, and this event left a deep mark on him. He closed himself off and became afraid of everything that reminded him of that tragedy. Due to psychological trauma, the boy loses control over his abilities. But as long as his teacher extends the lockdown, he is in control. What do you mean, restrictions have been imposed? The boy asks in surprise. The old man tossed his thoughts around in his head and finally came up with an excellent excuse that the little one would believe 100%. No, no, I meant that, so that Banyasimjiando worked, your inner strength must grow further and reach at least the 10th level, otherwise nothing will work. Until then, you won't be able to show all your power in practice. Don't worry, you're just not mature enough yet, the old man said with a trembling in his voice and then all over his body. I see, the boy said with fear and disappointment at the same time. Phew, barely got away with it, thought the mentor. The truth that he hides will be a shock to him and his power and strength. He is already at level 8 and the restrictions I imposed may not work. We need to check it tonight, the old man continued his thoughts. They went to the river. It is wide and calm, its waters have a turquoise hue. The banks of the river are covered with a dense forest consisting of tall trees with green foliage. In front of it there was a small island with trees. The landscape looks calm and peaceful. The river reflects the sky and you can see the reflection of trees and clouds in it. The forest creates a feeling of coolness and freshness. An island in the foreground adds depth and perspective to the landscape. The boy stood waist deep with one leg bare in the water and held the stones so that his only movement could knock them down and they would fall into the water. He held his posture gracefully, all the muscles of his body tense. Hair flew and played with the wind. He was handsome beyond his years. He stood calmly until a bird flew over him and quacked disgustingly. He never liked these seagulls, so he moved a little, causing the stone on his head and 2 stones on his shoulders to almost fall into the water. He heard his mentor shout, "I told you not to stagger." He shouted, frying fish and preparing some kind of potion or decoction. He laughed at him. "You still can't stand up straight, ho-oh, when are you going to eat then?" The kid thought to himself how hard it is for him now. He hasn't eaten anything since the morning, and his grandfather is frying fish in front of his nose. He shouted to him, "I'm going crazy now, can you please don't do this?" In response to this he received only a dissatisfied glance from the girl in his direction. "There's only an hour left, it's bad luck, are you really right, it's just a task and you won't be able to eat?" Grandfather said with some gloating, devouring the first fish. He had long ago learned how to cook tasty and juicy fish, regardless of its age or size. Fire-grilled fish is one of the most ancient ways of cooking fish. It has been known to people for thousands of years. In ancient times, people cooked fish over a fire using stones or grates. This method of preparing fish was simple and effective. It made it possible to quickly cook fish while maintaining its juiciness and taste. In ancient times, fish was cooked over a fire using stones or grates. This method of preparing fish was simple and effective. It made it possible to quickly cook fish while maintaining its juiciness and taste. As society developed, people began to come up with new ways to prepare fish. They started using various spices and sauces to enhance the taste of the fish. In the Middle Ages, fish was often cooked in the oven or in a frying pan. The first recipes for fish dishes also appeared at this time. During the Renaissance, fish began to be prepared in more sophisticated ways. Recipes for fish dishes with sauces and side dishes have become popular. Therefore, the old man chose the best option to preserve its taste and juiciness. This training will help you increase the movement of energy in your body to another level by drinking a drink from a bottle that looks like a flask, said grandfather. The boy had no choice but to endure. He always did this so that he could have dinner after training or at least not get hit in the head with some object. He listened carefully to the words that the mentor spoke. Well, as he spoke, he ordered what and who to do. And now, thinking about what to order, the boy get to that big boulder, using the newfound technique. It doesn't matter how long it takes you. As soon as you do this, eat this delicious fish. But remember, your training will end when, and only when you can reach the stone. The boy with stones on his hands and head began to glow with rage. His thoughts swarmed with those words that he thought would never get out of his head. I knew that he would come up with something again. It's not a workout, it's just a mockery of me. Damn it! The old man, finishing the fish, said, "Yes, and one more thing, I forgot to say. In 2 hours you can't move further than 3 meters, that is, you won't be able to finish before lunch, okay?" Smiling with all 32 teeth, said the mentor. Finally, after a week of patience, the baby could not stand it and shouted, "No, damn it, I don't understand. How can you move for 2 hours while constantly marking time?" The old man was a little surprised by such aggression on the part of his student, but, oddly enough, he became angry. He, looking at him from the angle with which he turned his head, gray with age, said, Well, you just need to walk very slowly. Show how to do it? He got up and went to the river. He took the stones in his hands, placed one on his head and two on his shoulders and took his starting position. Despite his age, it was very easy for him. He seemed to be floating in the air, without feeling the weight of the stones on his body. At the same time, he made the first shell, then waited for the time and made another one. And so he slowly moved, closer to the stones that he told his student to reach. The boy stood in shock, counting the minutes as he walked. The student watched how easily his teacher and mentor walked on the water. Having counted to a certain point, he realized that the old man spent 15 minutes on one step. The boy, before starting training, raised his head to the sky and saw his friend there. The bird has dark gray plumage with white spots on the wings and tail. She has a long, pointed beak and strong paws, not like when she was small and injured. The bird flies high in the sky, and its silhouette clearly stands out against the blue sky. She floats in the air without moving her wings and appears to be floating in the air. Looking at him, the boy almost dropped the stone from his head. After that, he heard the voice of his teacher. "Oh, Pa! Your stone is loose. If it falls into the water, you will start the entire path you have already traveled all over again." Trying to keep the stones in balance at the same time, the boy staggered in different directions. He flew to the right, then to the left. Despite all his attempts, the boy still fell into the water, along with all the stones, head down. Angry, he dropped from the water, his face red as a tomato. And he himself is overcome with anger. His cheeks turn even redder and he begins to breathe heavily. With these emotions he begins to shout, "NGH, the current here is too strong. That's why I fell," he justifies himself, waving his arms in different directions. Strick, without deviating from his opinion, replied, "Yes, it makes no difference to me. Start all over again." "Oh, if you had finished, you could have already eaten delicious and freshly fried fish," the teacher said jerkily. He became even more angry, but did not give up on his goal. It was nearing lunchtime. The picture shows a blue sky with white clouds. The sky takes up most of the image and is the main focus. The sky has a rich blue color, which creates a feeling of spaciousness and freedom. Clouds are located throughout the sky, and they add volume and texture to it. Clouds come in different shapes and sizes, and they create a sense of movement and life. He still stood, walked and tried to reach the highest stone that was there. So he stood at the end of the day, even at night, until he finally succeeded. He raised his hands high to the sky and shouted, "Grandfather! I completed the task." From that moment on, cold autumn set in. Autumn in the forest is a time of change. The trees shed their leaves and the forest becomes colorful. The air is filled with the aromas of fallen leaves and mushrooms. The sun shines less often and the days become shorter. At night, frost sets in and frost appears on the trees. The forest becomes quieter. Birds fly south, and only sometimes you can hear their farewell cry. The forest becomes colorful. The trees turn yellow, orange, red and brown, and the air is filled with the scents of fallen leaves and mushrooms. Now in the forest you can find nuts such as walnuts, hazelnuts, and hazel, and mushrooms such as honey mushrooms, chanterelles, boletus and boletus, which, by the way, is what the boy and his mentor periodically do. The old man stood behind his student. The old man's jacket is dark blue in color and has a long hem. It fastens with a regular button and has two pockets on the chest, if you can call it that. The pants are dark blue in color and have straight legs. They fasten with a zipper and have two pockets on the waist. The old man's shoes are brown and have a high heel. They fasten with laces and have a thick sole. The old man's scarf is red and wraps around his neck. The scarf has a dense texture and protects the neck from the cold. The boy also changed into the same clothes as his teacher, but in shades of blue. Grandfather, standing calmly, said, "Well, now show me what you have learned during all this time." The boy, despite the cold or something else, began to use his magic. He quickly moved past trees bare of leaves, jumped higher than wild hares, and flew faster than falcons. The old man watched all this and said to himself, in his innermost thoughts, "I have limited his internal energy, but he still shows such an incredible result. I wonder what will happen when I remove all the shackles that I have placed on him when he was a little child." He, looking at the boy, said, "That's enough," he said, extending his open palm forward, duplicating his words with a gesture. "You have very well mastered this walking technique for the purpose of defense. You're great boy, you're great." The boy, hearing this, ran closer to the teacher and stopped from him, literally 2 or 3 steps away. The words were spinning in his thoughts. Grandfather praised me. Does that mean my technique has become so magnificent that even he noticed? He rose to his full height and said, "Ha ha ha. Thank you very much, I tried really hard." The boy grandfather said with some modesty and joy at the same time, "Last time you showed me teleportation. Tell me, please, how can I learn this?" Teleportation is a hypothetical change in the coordinates of an object, in which the trajectory of the object cannot be described mathematically by a continuous function of time. In science fiction, teleportation is often depicted as the instantaneous movement of an object from one point in space to another. However, in reality, teleportation will likely be more difficult and take some time. There are several different methods of teleportation that have been proposed by scientists. One approach is to use quantum entanglement. In quantum entanglement, two particles are bound to each other in such a way that their state cannot be described independently of each other. This means that if the state of one particle changes, the state of the other particle will also change. Another approach to teleportation is to use wormholes. Wormholes are hypothetical tunnels that connect 2 points in spacetime. If wormholes exist, then they could be used to teleport an object from one point in space to another, bypassing the distance between them. Teleportation is a complex concept and is still being explored. However, if teleportation is ever realized, it could have revolutionary consequences for society. Teleportation could be used to move people and goods over long distances quickly and efficiently. It could also be used to deliver humanitarian aid to disaster areas. The advantages of teleportation, as the boy knew from his mentor's lectures, are: move quickly and efficiently. Teleportation could be used to move people and goods over long distances quickly and efficiently. This could reduce travel time and costs. Increased security. Teleportation could be used to improve safety as it could reduce the need to transport people and cargo in vehicles. Improving access to services. Teleportation could be used to improve access to services such as education and healthcare. This could make these services more accessible to people living in remote areas. The old man, smiling, said, "You will practice your walking technique more and you will succeed on your own, without my instructions," the teacher said emotionlessly. The boy panicked and couldn't control his question. Training again? If you don't want to study, then fine, the teacher said with some sadness. No, I adore it, the boy quickly added. After these words, they walked towards the house. A cave appeared next to a small living area. A cave is a naturally occurring cavity located in the upper part of the Earth's crust, connected to the surface by one or more entrance holes. Caves are formed by the dissolution or weathering of rocks. Caves can come in different sizes, shapes, and types. Some caves are very small and can be walked through in a few minutes, while others can be huge and can take days to explore. Caves can be smooth and level, or they can be rough and dangerous. Caves are often inhabited by a variety of life forms, including cave animals such as bats and cave plants. Caves may also contain various geological formations such as stalactites and stalagmites. The entrance to the cave can be of any size and shape. It can be narrow and difficult to navigate, or it can be wide and open. The old man, pointing to the house and the cave, says, "Okay, now I will live here," points to the house, "and you, now, there you go," pointing to the cave with your index finger. And then he opens the doors to the cave, letting out a bright light and letting the boy in first so that he can go deeper. Wow! I didn't know that there was such a big cave behind the door. The boy shook his head. The old man, not paying attention to this, continued to say, "Now I will bring you clothes and food here, but under no circumstances should you go outside this cave," the mentor said with a serious face. The kid was delighted and asked a rhetorical question. Really? The joy did not leave his face, but when he heard a strange sound, he turned around and saw a wolf who was on a chain. The wolf has black fur and its eyes glow with red fire. The wolf looks angry and dangerous. The wolf sits on a chain that is attached to a tree. The wolf looks straight at the boy, and his eyes are full of hatred. The wolf looks ready to attack. He has a powerful build, with a broad chest and strong paws. The wolf has long, sharp fangs and claws. The boy shouted loudly, "A wolf!" The boy repeated, pointing his finger over and over again. The old man with a calm face said, "From now on, it will be useful to you for training. So try to make friends with him," said the old man, taking a step back so that it would not be noticeable. "What? The boy was surprised. I can train alone. I can, and even practiced it. The boy panicked even more. He saw the old man already standing on the side of the door that was outside the cave. Grandfather, you will live here for some time, the old man said unshakably, and I will bring water and food to the door. Until your training is over. Wolf, what should I do with him? How to make friends so that he doesn't eat me, the kid screamed, pointing at the big shaggy animal. The old man only replied, the wolf, of course, is very fast, but have you mastered the walking technique? Do you know how to use it correctly both in attack and in harrowing? Reality is different from training, and you will soon understand this. After these words, the magician used magic and broke the chain on which the wolf was sitting. After that, the wolf growled loudly and began to slowly move towards the boy, stepping softly and carefully, as if he was afraid to scare him away. The boy, looking at the wolf and the possible cause of his death, did not notice how the doors from the street were bolted. The boy ran to those big oak doors and fell to his knees, screaming to be let out, to study in the forest again, or to stand in the cold water, naked to the waist. It's better this way than to be eaten by a hungry and fast wolf, with whom it's even difficult to fight, since there is neither a bow nor a sword. In a word, nothing. The boy wanted to be outside again and feel his grandfather's blows on his head, and not hear the hot breath of a wolf. He slowly turned around and saw that the beast was standing too close to him, but he did not think of running. He knew that if he tried, he would definitely get hurt. There was only one thing left for him to do: try to make friends with him.